As we sit here, Helen, you're 95.
Yes.
So tell me, how did you get to live so long and be so active and clear?
Because I have been very active all my life. I've been swimming since I was 4 years old. When I was in boot camp, the leader said, all of you who think you can swim, suit up and show me. So we jumped from a 25-foot tower, which is the distance between the main deck and the sea, and then we had to swim and prove to her that and out of 400 women, 10 of us were picked.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was one. And I've been swimming all my life.
Do you still swim?
And
Do you still swim? Do you still swim?
yes, we have a swimming pool here, and it's only like 4.5 feet deep, but I can still swim.
How often do you swim?
Usually 3 times a week for an hour. It was a balmy Sunday afternoon when there were 6 of us from the class of 41 sitting there listening to the music of the year and singing along with the songs. Then all of a sudden the music stopped. The man said, "We are being bombed by the imperial country of Japan at Pearl Harbor." Well, we all looked at each other and says, "Where's Pearl Harbor?" And so then he said, "This means war." It was on December the 7th in Pennsylvania, a little past 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And my father was a veteran of World War I, and I knew he would know more about this situation than me. So I started up the street, and I was crying, big tears, because I knew my brothers would go. And then I said to myself, well, I'm going to go too. And then my father had his ear to the old Philco radio, and I said, "Dad, what's going on?" He said, "Be quiet, Helen." And he was listening to what was going on. That's how I found out about Pearl Harbor.
Did your brothers end up going in the military?
Pardon me?
Did your brothers end up going in the military?
Yes, my older brother was 20 years old at the time, and my younger brother was almost 17. So the younger one entered the following May on his birthday, May of 42. My older brother joined immediately. And
Did they go in the Navy?
Yes, in the Navy. Because my father was in World War I in the cold, wet, dreary trenches of France, and he used to talk about that. And we used to say when we were little kids, we're never going on a dark, wet, or dreary trench. So 4 of us ended up in the Navy.
Wow.
And I went down to the recruiting station after my younger brother, who was 17, joined. I said, "I'd like to join the Navy." He looked me up and down, and I must have looked like I was 12 years old. He said, "How old are you?" And I just turned 18. And he said, "How old are you?" I said, "Almost 19. He said, "Come back when you're 20, bring a permission slip from your parents and your birth certificate." So that's how I had to wait until September of 1943 before
What did you do during that period? Did you go to school? Did you go to school while you were waiting?
No. No, I was working. It was right after the Depression, and I was helping my parents.
What did your father do for a living?
My father was a contract painter.
Oh.
And he was very good at it. Somebody say they want an oak door. He could draw the door, the paint, to make it look like oak painting.
Wow.
And, he was a very talented
And you had 3 brothers?
I had 3 brothers, 1 sister.
And one
but
sister.
she married a sailor, so we forgave her.
So actually there were 5 sailors
yeah.
counting her husband. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop that.
Drink beer and drop a shot glass filled with bourbon into the beer mug, and they were called Boilermakers. And we would kid each other to see who would be the first under the table. But that's just part of what we did.
Did you smoke?
Yes, I did. I smoked when my husband went to Korea. He was called back into the service in 1950. Along the way, after he was gone for so long, I went up to the tobacco store on the corner and bought a pack of cigarettes and started smoking. And that was in the early 50s. And I smoked for 10 years. And then all of a sudden, I went to get a newspaper and headline said, "Cigarette smoking causes lung cancer." I threw the paper down, threw the cigarettes, carton of cigarettes down with it, walked out the door, and that was the end
Wow.
of smoking.
Wow.
And that was in like 63. So I smoked about 10 years.
How many children did you guys
I
have?
had 3. My oldest is 71. We lost our daughter when she was 58, 10 years ago, and we have a young son who is 63. I keep saying we, but
Yeah. What were their names?
Kurt, K-U-R-T, is the oldest. He's a history teacher.
Where at?
Oh, he's retired now, but he was a high school history teacher and then worked summers at a university. And Carla, she had 2 degrees. She was very, very intelligent. She was an artist first, and then she went to California from Pennsylvania, and she called my mother, not me, and said, "Artists are a dime a dozen, I'm changing." So she went into mortuary sciences in San Francisco, and she finished 1 degree or 1 year of at a chapel in a cemetery. And then she called my mother and said, "I'm fed up with death." So she packed a bag and went into the wilderness, and she nearly died. She was emancipated and dehydrated, and some lumbermen found her and rushed her to a hospital. Then she came back. We were living here in the desert, my husband and I, and she did not like the desert. So she wandered from coast to coast lived at different places. Finally, she passed away in 2008.
What did you die of?
What did she die of?
They don't know. She lived alone. She became a loner. She never married. And we got the word that she had passed away. And she was in New Mexico then, living there. And but we brought her ashes back. And she's buried here. And we will be in the same vault. As having a lot of vegetables, everybody had gardens, and if your father planted too many carrots and the neighbor had too many tomatoes, they would share what you needed. Everybody helped everybody, and as for entertainment, we would roller skate on the street, and in the winter we would sled there's a voluntary fire company near our home that had a bobsled, and we would all get on it and ride that down the street about a half a mile downhill. Then we'd have to pull that heavy thing up again. So we did things like that. There were motion pictures, and it cost 5 cents to go to the show. And there was an opera house in our town. And
Were you guys Amish? Were you Amish?
I wasn't. There, we lived in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where they call them plain people, the Amish and the Mennonites. And excuse me. When we moved from the city to the suburbs, it had been an Amish farm formerly, and the Amish people sold the land a part of it at a time. And we were we built our home on the last quarter of their farm lot. And if they needed to go into town, they used horses and buggies, and the horses were not allowed in town because they destroyed the surface of the streets.
Oh,
So the lady would come down and ask if I would take one of her children into the doctor. Well, I'd end up with all her children and her in my station wagon, and we would go to the doctor. And to pay me, she would come down as soon as we got home with her apron pulled up full of produce, which was in season at the time, whether it be apples or corn or what. And once she brought me a chicken, a clean, ready-to-cook chicken. That's how they thanked you for what you did.
What year was this? Do you remember the time span?
I'd say it was in the 1970s. Because we came to Arizona in 1980.
Okay. Were the Amish people nice people? Were they nice people?
Yes, they were very nice. They had children that, I think they had a child every year. They were in steps. 7, 8 children.
Wow.
But they were all healthy and beautiful children. They mostly had blonde hair. And the clan had only 11 last names. And they carried it from Germany or wherever they came from. So, and they would intermarry at first, and then, which caused quite a bit of trouble with families. But they were good people, hard workers.
Havasu?
Oh, Jim was coming through on a troop train on the way to Korea in 1950. They stopped at Kingman for the evening meal. Well, they didn't have accommodations for a troop train, so everybody's out in the street with a table with sandwiches and soups and coffee for the troop train. And the next day when he landed at Treasure Island, he called and said, "We're moving to the desert." He says, "The sky's so blue, the people are so friendly," and then he told us about the troop train stopping in Kingman. And when he returned, he was a newspaper man, and he retired when he was 55. So we packed up and moved bag and baggage right here to Lake Havasu, built our house, and we lived there until June of last year, 1918. But my Jim passed away in 2016, and I finally sold the house.
What street was it on? What street was your house on?
We lived on Yucca Drive.
Okay.
But like Bison turns into the mountain and Yucca Drive turns toward the lake. It was quite high, and we had a good view.
So what did he do for the newspaper?
He was what you call a stereotype. It was like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, putting all the columns where they belonged and everything before they had computers. And
It was called a stereotype?
yeah, it was called stereotype.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh. And when he came here in the 50s at Kingman, you had an idea from then on that when he retired, you wanted to move here.
Yes.
Is that it?
But we were down to the employment agency, and everybody said, "You're overqualified. We have no work for you," to my husband. And then another man came and behind the counter, and he shouted, "I need a woman veteran." I put my hand up and said, "I'm a woman veteran." So I got a job in a linen, waterbed linen factory.
Where?
And,
What city?
Right here in
Here.
Lake Havasu.
Oh, when you first
It
retired.
was down on Industrial. And I was there to learn how to sew these big, giant, it looked like a real big pillowcase, which happened to end up as a quilt. And I was sewing on an industrial, and I never knew what end of the needle to use. And I learned fast. Putting these, it looked like a giant pillowcase. I said, then they would fill it. They would go down the line, assembly line, until it was finished. It was a quilted bedspread.
How long did you do that?
Well, they closed. It was more or less seasonal. It was busy before Christmas. And then I got a job at the McCulloch chainsaw bar plant,
Oh, you did.
cleaning the blades.
Oh.
And all this black stuff was coming up on all over you, and I demanded
Goggles?
masks because I said I'm not standing here for 8 hours and breathing that black stuff as I'm cleaning these bars. They call them bars.
What were they?
So
The bars. What were they?
they were the blades.
Oh, the blades.
Yes, and
Oh, for the chainsaws. Were they the blades for the chainsaws?
yes. And I would be putting them through a machine to clean, to make them polished.
Okay.
And so then I demanded a mask for my nose and mouth. So they went over to the drugstore downtown someplace and came back with a box of face masks. But the rest of my face was turning black from this black stuff. And once there was the visitors came to visit, men who came to see the plant, and they looked at me with all this black in the mask, and I took the mask off, and the rest of my face was white like it should be. But I would not stand there and breathe those. But no one said anything about it. They worked there and kept it all, getting lung cancer or something. But I don't know whatever happened. But I never did.
How long did you work at the chainsaw company? Do you remember the years?
Not till I retired at 62. And I was 58 when I got here, so 3-4 years. But like I said, it was seasonal. It wasn't.
What is your date of birth? What is your date of birth?
What was September 8th, 1923.
Okay. And did your husband ever get a job when he retired here?
Yes, he was cleaning swimming pools.
Oh.
And they couldn't find anything else for him to do.
He was overqualified.
But he did have a fairly good pension from the newspaper that he worked for. And,
what newspaper did he work for?
there were in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, there was a morning paper called the Intelligencer Journal, and the evening paper, New Era it was called. And sometimes, at first he started on the evening paper, and then he did the morning paper, which meant night work.
Oh.
And but he worked until he was 55, retired, and moved.
Could you spell the name of the paper, the name of each paper, the morning and the evening paper?
Intelligencer Journal. I can't tell. It's intelligent. That's all I knew.
Intelligence
And then
Journal.
the evening paper was called the New Era.
E-
New Era.
ERA.
Yes.
Okay, good. Good.
And they had a Sunday news that took in news from 3 cities: York, Lancaster, and another one. I don't know what it was.
Were they all owned by the same company, or were they owned by
Yes.
different companies? They're all owned by the same company?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good.
My gym. I painted a stone, red, white, and blue, and I have my gym printed on with an arrow pointing to the picture for everybody to see when they come to visit my room.
And you talked to him, right? You talked to him?
And yes, I do. I talk to my gym, say goodnight to him, but he never talks back.
What is that?
This is called a fallen soldier's flag, like a fallen warrior or a fallen soldier. It's it's supposed to be a replica of the American flag that they would wrap their bodies in.
When someone was wounded on the battlefield,
Yeah.
so that they could stay warm? So that they could stay warm?
Pardon me?
So that they could stay warm?
Yes, they would put the American flag around them when they were lying wounded. Seen from the sea, covered with this black oil. That was after they torpedoed the U-boat, and then they would take them aboard their ship, which was a cruiser, and have them shower and put POW pajamas on, and that's what they look like, pajamas, POW uniforms on, and take them to dinner. And he said, I never saw sugar and butter disappear so fast when those German sailors sat down to eat their meal. But they would never sit down until the leader sat down first, and then they would all sit and have their meal.
Oh.
Master, assistant to the navigator, he said, one good thing about it, I always knew where we were going. Yeah, he was
And battleships were named after states, and cruisers were named
Pardon?
after... Battleships were named after states, and cruisers were named after cities.
battleships are for states, and the next ship is a cruiser, which is named for cities. And it goes all the way down to landing crafts, which are named for animals.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, because there was a man, a guest here, and he said he was on the Wolf. I said, what kind of a ship is a Wolf? And he said it was a landing craft.